The grandfather clock struck midnight when Corinne pushed open the library door. Tavian sat in his mother's old leather chair, his tie hanging loose around his neck, a creased letter trembling in his grip. 3 days without sleep had carved shadows beneath his eyes. The funeral flowers in the hallway had already started to wilt, filling the Kensington mansion with the heavy scent of decay. He didn't look up when she entered. He just kept staring at that letter, the one Josephine had written before the cancer took her, the one meant to be opened only after her burial. Corinne's heart slammed against her ribs. She recognized the handwriting from across the room. "Close the door," Tavian said. His voice was quiet. Too quiet. She obeyed. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely grip the handle. When the latch clicked shut, Tavian finally raised his eyes to hers, and in that single look, she knew. He knew everything. For 5 years, I scrubbed my own son's floors and ironed his shirts. For 5 years, I watched him eat breakfasts I prepared, listened to his phone calls through closed doors, and memorized the sound of his laughter from the other side of a wall. And for 5 years, he never knew I was the woman who gave him life. Tavian's jaw tightened as he lifted the letter higher. "My mother's letter says my birth mother is alive." His words came out fractured, barely controlled. "She says that woman has been living in this house the whole time, sleeping under my roof, serving me dinner." He paused. The silence between us stretched like a wire about to snap. "She says it's you, Corinne." His voice cracked on my name. "Is that true?" I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. This was the moment I had rehearsed 100 times in my head. None of those rehearsals felt like this. My pulse hammered in my ears. Tavian was waiting for an answer, and every second I stayed silent was another brick in the wall forming between us. "But how do you explain 23 years of absence to the child you left behind? If you had a baby you couldn't raise, what would you sacrifice to give them a better life? Would you sign the adoption papers and walk away, even if it destroyed you? Could you scrub their floors and press their shirts for half a decade, just to breathe the same air as them, knowing that one day the truth might turn you into the villain of their story?" I made a choice when Tavian was 3 days old. A closed adoption, no contact allowed, a billionaire family who promised him the world. I traded my heart for his future, and now, with Josephine cold in the ground, I was about to pay the price. Tonight, my son finally knew my name. But the question that haunted me was far heavier than any secret. Would he ever forgive me for it? Before I show you how this all began, I need to ask you something. If you were standing where I stood that night, with your child's eyes burning into yours, demanding the truth you spent years hiding, what would you do? Would you finally confess? Or would you stay a ghost in their life forever, watching from the shadows, loving them from a distance they could never close? Drop your answer in the comments. I read every single one. And if you're new here, welcome to this channel, where we share stories of broken families, impossible choices, and the love that somehow survives through it all. These are the stories that stay with you long after the video ends, the ones that make you call your mother at midnight or hug your kids a little tighter. If that means something to you, take a second to hit subscribe and tap the notification bell. That way, you won't miss what happens when Tavian finally hears the truth from my own lips. The confrontation in that library didn't come out of nowhere. Every secret has a beginning. Every lie has a first moment when you choose silence over honesty. And mine started long before I ever set foot in the Kensington mansion. It started with a newspaper ad, a desperate plan, and a decision that would either bring me closer to my son or destroy any chance of him ever loving me. 5 years earlier, I was living in a one-bedroom apartment in South Atlanta, working double shifts at a hospital laundry facility and searching for a way to get close to the child I had given up 2 decades before. The day I found the job listing for a live-in maid position at the Kensington estate in Buckhead, my hands wouldn't stop shaking. I applied before I could talk myself out of it. That was the day I chose to become a stranger in my own son's home. And nothing would ever be the same again. 5 years earlier, I drove through Buckhead with my heart in my throat. The streets of old money Atlanta stretched out like a different country from the one I knew. Wide lawns rolled behind stone walls. Oak trees lined the boulevards, their branches forming canopies over roads that had never seen a pothole. Every house sat far back from the street, guarded by hedges trimmed with military precision. My 12-year-old Honda Civic rattled over the smooth asphalt, the engine knocking every few seconds like it was embarrassed to be there. The air conditioning had stopped working 2 summers ago. Sweat pooled at the small of my back, soaking through my best blouse. 22 years. That was how long it had been since I held my son. 8,030 days since I pressed my lips to his forehead and whispered a promise I never kept. Now I was driving toward a set of massive wrought-iron gates that cost more than everything I owned. Behind them lived the boy I gave away. I had rehearsed this moment for years. Nothing prepared me for how heavy my foot felt on the brake. I gripped the cracked steering wheel and stared up at those gates. The black iron stretched 12 feet high, topped with gold leaf flourishes that caught the afternoon sun. A bronze letter K was centered between the 2 doors, polished so bright I could see my reflection in it from 20 feet away. My hands looked wrong against the worn leather of the steering wheel. The cracks in the material matched the lines on my palms. 40 years of hard work, written in skin and upholstery. Beyond the gates, a cobblestone driveway curved through grounds that looked like something from a magazine. Fountains, rose gardens, a guest house bigger than any apartment I had ever rented. I thought about turning around. My Honda idled, coughing exhaust into the pristine air. A gardener on a riding mower glanced toward the gate, probably wondering why someone in a rusted sedan was blocking the service entrance. I could leave right now, drive back to Macon, pretend I never found this address, but my son was somewhere behind those gates, and I had spent 2 decades pretending he did not exist. I was done pretending. His father's name was Deacon. That was the first thing I thought about as I waited for someone to open the gate. Deacon, with his warm brown skin and the kindest laugh I had ever heard. Deacon, who worked nights at the tire factory and days at his uncle's church. Deacon, who promised me we would figure it out together. We were both 18. We were both terrified. And we were both foolish enough to believe love was enough to raise a child. The car accident on I-75 happened 3 weeks before my due date. A semi-truck jackknifed in the rain. Deacon's Buick did not stand a chance. I buried the father of my child on a Tuesday. I gave birth to our son on a Sunday. And 2 weeks later, I signed papers that meant I would never see my baby again. The adoption was closed. No contact, no updates, no photographs. Just a promise that he would go to a family who could give him everything I could not. 22 years of silence. Until now. A woman appeared at the service entrance before I could second-guess myself again. She was tall, early 60s, with steel-grey hair pulled back in a flawless bun. Her black uniform was pressed so sharply it could cut paper. Everything about her radiated quiet authority, from the way she held her clipboard to the way her eyes swept over my car, my clothes, my nervous hands. Corinne Ellis. Her voice was professional but not cold. Yes, ma'am. I'm Geneva Hartwell, head of household staff. She did not offer her hand. Pull around to the side lot. 3rd space from the left. I obeyed without a word. By the time I parked and walked back to the service entrance, Geneva was waiting with the posture of someone who had seen every kind of desperate woman come through these gates. The hopeful ones, the scared ones, the ones running from something they would never name. She sized me up in 3 seconds flat. Can you carry a tray without trembling? The question hit harder than she knew. Yes, ma'am, I lied. Geneva led me through a side door and into the service corridor. The transition was immediate. Outside, the Kensington estate looked like a palace. Inside these back hallways, it was a machine. White walls, fluorescent strips overhead, the hum of industrial equipment coming from somewhere deeper in the house. The family is hosting a brunch in 30 minutes, Geneva explained, her heels clicking against the tile floor. We're short-staffed. Mrs. Kensington approved your trial today. Do exactly as I say, speak only when spoken to, and you might have a job by sunset. We turned a corner, and the corridor opened into the main kitchen. I stopped breathing. Stainless steel surfaces stretched across the room, gleaming under bright lights. A marble island dominated the center, where two sous chefs were plating appetizers with surgical precision. A massive sub-zero refrigerator hummed against the far wall. Staff members moved in coordinated silence, carrying trays, folding napkins, checking temperatures. "This is the staging area," Geneva said. "You'll work from here. Champagne service first, then canapés. The family expects invisible perfection." She handed me a white apron. "Put this on, and remember, if they notice you, you've already failed." I tied the apron with fingers that would not stop shaking. Geneva noticed. She did not comment. "The brunch is in the solarium," she said. 12 guests, plus Mrs. Kensington and her son. You'll be assisting with service for Mr. Tavian's colleagues from the firm. Mr. Tavian. The words landed in my chest like a physical blow. So that was what they called my baby now. Mr. Tavian. Not the name I whispered to him in the hospital. Not the nickname I invented during the 11 days I was allowed to hold him. Just Mr. Tavian, spoken by a woman who had no idea what those 2 words meant to me. Geneva handed me a silver tray. Champagne flutes. Stem facing left. Approach from the right. Offer without speaking unless addressed. "Can you handle that?" I nodded, because I could not trust my voice. From somewhere beyond the kitchen doors, I heard the clink of glasses and the murmur of polite laughter. The sounds of a world I was about to enter as a servant. Geneva pushed the door open. "Go," she said. I stepped toward the laughter, toward the light, toward the son who would not recognize my face. The solarium hit me like walking into a photograph from another life. Sunlight poured through floor-to-ceiling windows, flooding the room with warmth that seemed to glow from the walls themselves. White marble floors reflected the light. Modern art hung in careful arrangements, splashes of color that probably cost more than my annual salary. Beyond the glass, manicured gardens rolled toward a swimming pool that shimmered turquoise in the distance. Everything was green and gold and impossibly perfect. The guests matched the setting. Women in designer dresses moved between conversation clusters, their jewelry catching the light with every gesture. Men in tailored blazers laughed at jokes I could not hear, holding champagne flutes like extensions of their hands. Everyone stood at precise distances from one another, close enough for intimacy, far enough for status. I recognized the choreography immediately. I had worked enough society events to know that rich people had their own language of posture and positioning. Where you stood told everyone who you were. And where I stood, in my borrowed apron with my silver tray, told them I was no one. I moved through the room like a ghost. That was the job, after all. Be useful. Be silent. Be invisible. Let them take what they need, without ever acknowledging that you exist. I had done this 100 times at other estates, but this time, every step felt like walking through water. Heavy, slow, wrong. I offered champagne to a woman in pearls. She took a glass without looking at me. I approached a man in a grey suit discussing real estate. He waved me away before I could speak. I was invisible, exactly as Geneva instructed, but the irony burned in my throat. I knew things about the guest of honor that no one in this room could guess. I knew his birth weight, 7 pounds, 4 ounces. I knew his birthday, September 14th, at 3:47 in the morning. I knew the sound of his first cry, the way his tiny fingers curled around mine, the exact shade of brown his eyes had been when they first opened. I knew him before he had a name, and now I was just another servant he would forget by tomorrow. I saw him before I was ready. He stood near the windows, half turned toward the garden, listening to a colleague tell a story that made him smile. The light caught his profile, and for a moment I forgot how to breathe. He had deacon's eyes, dark brown, almost black, with lashes so long they cast shadows on his cheeks. The same eyes that had looked at me with love in the back seat of a borrowed car 23 years ago. But his jaw was mine. Strong, slightly squared at the corners, the same stubborn angle I saw every morning in the mirror. And when he smiled fully, tilting his head back at something his colleague said, I saw my mother, the woman who had raised me alone in Macon, who died the year after I gave her grandchild away. He was all of us. Every person I had ever loved, combined into one man, I was not allowed to claim. My knees went weak. My stomach dropped. The tray in my hands trembled just enough to make the glasses clink. I forced myself to breathe. Invisible. I had to stay invisible. For a moment, I was not in the solarium anymore. I was 18 years old, lying in a hospital bed with fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. Sweat soaked my gown. My entire body ached from 12 hours of labor, and in my arms, wrapped in a blue blanket, was the most perfect thing I had ever seen. He was so small, so warm. His eyes were closed, his tiny fist pressed against my chest like he was trying to hold on. Deacon's mother sat beside me, her Bible open in her lap, praying in a whisper that never stopped. She had driven 4 hours to be there. She was the only family I had left. A nurse came in with a clipboard. "You don't have to decide today," she said. Her voice was kind but practiced. She had delivered this speech before. "The adoption agency gives you 2 weeks. I looked down at my son. My son. The word felt too big for my mouth, but I already knew the truth. Girls like me did not get 2 weeks. Girls like me did not get to pretend the world would wait while we figured things out. I had no job, no degree, no family except a grieving woman who could barely afford her own rent. The world does not wait for girls like me. I blinked, and I was back in the present. The solarium glittered around me. Guests laughed. Champagne flowed. My tray was still in my hands, still trembling slightly. No one had noticed my moment of absence. I steadied my breathing and forced myself to move. 1 foot in front of the other, 1 guest at a time, just like Geneva taught me. A woman in a red dress took a glass. A man with silver cufflinks waved me past. I was furniture. I was wallpaper. I was nothing. But with every step, I moved closer to Tavian. He was still by the windows, still laughing with his colleagues. A woman stood beside him now, her hand resting on his arm with casual possession. She was beautiful, with dark skin and a dress that probably cost more than my car. I recognized the body language. She was his, or she wanted to be. 5 more steps. 4. 3. My heart hammered so hard, I was sure everyone in the room could hear it. 2. 1. I was right behind him. Champagne. The word came out steadier than I expected. A small miracle. Tavian turned. Our eyes met for the first time in 22 years. He did not recognize me. Of course, he did not. He had no memory of my face. The last time he saw me, he was 11 days old. "Thank you," he said, and reached for a glass. His fingers brushed mine as he took it. The contact lasted less than a second, just skin against skin, a touch so brief it meant nothing to him. But to me, it was everything. I felt his warmth, the same warmth I had felt when they placed him in my arms for the first time, the same warmth that had haunted me every night for 2 decades. It was like touching his baby hand through 22 years of glass. He turned back to his colleagues without a second glance. The woman beside him said something that made him laugh. Someone called his name from across the room. And just like that, the moment was over. I stood there, tray in hand, trying to remember how to move. I wanted to ask him if he felt it too. That pull, that invisible thread between us, the connection that had been there since before he was born, since he was just a flutter in my belly and a hope in my heart. Would he feel anything? Some echo of the 9 months we shared a heartbeat? I watched his face as he sipped his champagne. Nothing. No flicker of recognition, no sense of familiarity, no pause in his conversation, just a kind smile, the same one he probably gave every server at every event, and his attention drifting back to the woman at his side. To him, I was no one. The realization should have broken me. Maybe it did, a little. But I had spent 22 years learning how to survive being no one to the person I loved most in the world. I knew how to carry the weight of invisible grief. I turned away before anyone could see my eyes water. More champagne, more guests, more invisibility. That was my job now. I watched him for the rest of the brunch. From the corner of the room, from behind other guests, from the doorway when I went to refill my tray. I watched him like he was a film I had waited my whole life to see. The woman beside him was called Sterling. I heard someone use her name when they greeted her. She was a lawyer too, from a family almost as wealthy as the Kensingtons. They moved together like people who had known each other for years. Comfortable, easy. His colleagues talked about cases I did not understand, mergers and acquisitions, hostile takeovers, numbers with too many zeros. They talked about the partnership track like it was a holy grail, and Tavian spoke with the confidence of someone who knew it was already his. He was successful. He was loved. He was everything I had prayed he would become when I signed those papers. And I was nothing more than the woman refilling glasses. This was what I wanted, I reminded myself. This was why I gave him up, so he could stand in a room like this, wearing a suit that cost more than my rent, laughing with people who would never know hunger or fear. I gave him this life. I just never expected it to hurt this much to see it. As I walked toward the kitchen, I heard him introduce himself to a new guest. The man had just arrived, shaking hands with Josephine before making his way to Tavian's circle. I was near enough to hear every word. "I don't think we've met," the man said. "Daniel Okafor, from the Chicago office." Tavian extended his hand with practiced grace. "I'm Tavian Kensington. Welcome to Atlanta." Kensington. Not the name I had given him. Not the name I had whispered into his tiny ear in the hospital, the one I made up from his father's middle name and my grandmother's maiden name. Tavian Kensington, son of Josephine and Franklin, heir to a fortune built on construction contracts and real estate. A man with a history I had no part in. Hearing my son say a name that was not mine felt like someone quietly erasing me from the world. I pushed through the kitchen doors before the tears could fall. Behind me, the brunch continued without pause. Glasses clinked. Laughter rose and fell. Tavian Kensington charmed another guest, and Corinne Ellis, the woman who gave him life, disappeared into the service corridor like she had never existed at all. I scrubbed the champagne flutes until my fingers ached. The brunch had ended an hour ago. The guests were gone. The solarium had been cleared and reset for whatever event came next. Most of the staff had moved on to other tasks, but I stayed at the sink, running hot water over crystal that was already spotless. It was the only way I knew to keep from falling apart. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face. Deacon's eyes looking through me. My mother's smile given to strangers. The casual way he said thank you like I was any other servant. I scrubbed harder. Perfectionism had always been my coping mechanism. When my mother died, I cleaned her apartment until my hands bled. When Deacon's funeral ended, I organized the church kitchen until midnight. When the adoption papers were signed, I took a job at a hotel and worked double shifts until I collapsed. If I kept moving, the grief could not catch me. "Those glasses are clean." The voice came from behind me. I spun around, soap suds dripping from my hands. Josephine Kensington stood in the kitchen doorway. She was smaller than she had seemed in the solarium. In the crowd, surrounded by guests and expensive furniture, Josephine had radiated power. Her presence filled the room the moment she entered. People adjusted their posture, lowered their voices, turned to acknowledge her without being asked. But here, in the quiet of the empty kitchen, I could see the woman beneath the reputation. She was in her late 60s, with silver-streaked hair styled close to her head and skin the color of dark honey. Her posture was impeccable, her dress simple but clearly expensive. A single strand of pearls hung around her neck. What struck me most were her eyes. Sharp, intelligent, watchful. The eyes of someone who had spent a lifetime reading people. She looked at me the way Geneva had, sizing me up, searching for something beneath the surface. I dried my hands on my apron and waited. "You did well today," she said. Her compliment felt like a test. "Thank you, Mrs. Kensington." She moved further into the kitchen, trailing her fingers along the marble countertop. Every movement was deliberate, controlled. "Geneva says you worked at the Pemberton estate in Macon. 6 years. "Yes, ma'am." "Why did you leave?" I had rehearsed this answer 100 times. Mrs. Pemberton passed. The estate was sold. And before that, hospital laundry, restaurant kitchens, cleaning services. I met her gaze. I've been in domestic work most of my adult life. Josephine nodded slowly. You're not from Atlanta? No, ma'am. Macon, originally. Yet here you are, applying for a live-in position an hour from your hometown. She paused. Why the Kensington estate? My throat tightened. I had prepared for this question too, but standing in front of the woman who had raised my son, the half-truths felt heavier than I expected. I've been looking for the right fit, I said. A household that values discretion and loyalty. When I saw your posting, I knew this was where I wanted to be. It was the most honest lie I had ever told. Josephine studied me for a long moment, then seemed to reach a decision. My husband Franklin built this house 35 years ago, she said, her voice softening. He was a contractor's son. I was a schoolteacher's daughter. Neither of us grew up with money, but we both knew how to work. She touched the countertop again, almost affectionately. Franklin made his fortune in construction. Government contracts, commercial developments, eventually real estate. We built something from nothing. I stayed silent, sensing she needed to tell this story. We tried for years to have children, she continued. Doctors, treatments, prayers. Nothing worked. A small, sad smile crossed her face. When Tavian came to us, it felt like a miracle. We were blessed. My chest ached. Blessed. That was the word she used. Like my loss was her gift from God. I wanted to hate her for it. But the tenderness in her voice when she spoke his name made that impossible. She loved him. That was clear. She had loved him for 22 years, through every milestone I had missed. I stood there, caught between gratitude and grief, grateful that she had loved him, that she had given him this life, this education, this future, that he grew up in a house full of beauty instead of a one-bedroom apartment in South Atlanta, but grieving too, jealous of every bedtime story, every scraped knee she bandaged, every birthday cake, every Christmas morning, every ordinary Tuesday afternoon when she got to be his mother and I got to be nothing. She had the years I gave away, and she did not even know I existed. I watched her face as she spoke about Tavian, noting the way her eyes softened, the way her shoulders relaxed. These were the tells of a mother who adored her child. I knew those tells. I saw them in my own reflection every day. He works too hard, Josephine said, almost to herself. Just like his father did. Forgets to eat if no one reminds him. She looked at me, and for a moment, something shifted in her expression. Recognition, maybe, or just the careful attention of a woman who never missed details. I need staff I can trust, she said. She straightened, and the businesswoman returned. The position is full-time, live-in. You'd have quarters in the carriage house behind the main estate. Salary is competitive, with benefits. Geneva will supervise your daily duties. She paused, watching my reaction. There are things I should tell you. My son is recently engaged. His fiancée is Sterling Harlow from the Buckhead Harlows. There will be events, publicity, a wedding to plan. The household will be under more scrutiny than usual. I nodded, filing the information away. Engaged. Sterling, the woman from the brunch. I need someone who won't let me down, Josephine continued. Someone who understands discretion. Someone who can anticipate needs before they're spoken. She stepped closer to me, and for a moment, we were just two women standing in a kitchen. Can you do that, Miss Ellis? I thought about the 22 years of silence, the closed adoption file, the promise I made to stay away forever. Yes, ma'am, I said, I can. Josephine held my gaze for a long moment, then nodded. One more thing, she said. My son forgets to take care of himself when he's working on a case. Late nights, skipped meals, too much coffee. I'd like you to keep an eye on that. She said it casually, like an afterthought. But the weight of the request settled over me like a blanket. She was asking me to take care of him. The woman who had raised my son was handing me a caretaking duty, passing it from one mother to another without knowing what she was doing. Of course, Mrs. Kensington. Good. She turned to leave, then paused at the door. Geneva will show you to the carriage house. You can start tomorrow. Just like that, it was done. I had a job in my son's home, a room on his property, a reason to see his face every day. I should have felt triumphant. I had planned this for months. Instead, I felt the weight of every lie I was about to live. That night, I sat alone in my new room in the carriage house. It was small but comfortable. A single bed, a dresser, a window that looked out toward the main house. The walls were freshly painted. The linens smelled like lavender. Outside, I heard the crunch of gravel as a car came up the driveway. I moved to the window without thinking. A black Mercedes pulled into the garage. The driver's door opened, and Tavian stepped out, loosening his tie as he walked toward the main house. His silhouette passed my window, close enough that I could have called out to him. He did not look my way. He did not know I was watching. I pressed my hand against the cold glass and watched him disappear through the back door. That night, I told myself I could handle 5 years of being a ghost in my own son's life. I told myself that proximity was enough, that watching from a distance was better than not watching at all. I did not yet know how much being a ghost can hurt. I did not yet know what secrets this house would force me to carry. If this story is pulling at something in your heart, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Trust me, you are going to want to be here when the truth finally comes out. Every morning at 6:15, his alarm went off upstairs. I learned to track his life by sound, the creak of his bedroom door opening, the shower running for exactly 8 minutes, the closet doors sliding open, the jingle of car keys lifted from the hallway table. By the end of my first month, I could tell what kind of day he was having before I ever saw his face. Quick shower meant he was running late for court. Long shower meant he was thinking through a problem. No shower meant he had never come home the night before, fallen asleep at his desk again, and was about to stumble downstairs looking for coffee before anyone else woke up. I memorized him the way mothers do. Through patterns. Through the small details no one else noticed. 2 eggs over medium. Wheat toast, never white. Black coffee in the blue mug, not the white one. He hated when the eggs were runny, but complained if they were too firm. There was a 30-second window where everything was perfect. I learned to time it down to the second. Most mornings, he rushed through the kitchen, grabbed only the coffee, and disappeared out the door with his tie still loose around his neck. But I made his plate anyway, every single morning. Just in case today was the day he had 5 extra minutes. I started leaving things for him. Small things. Things he would never notice came from me specifically. On days when he looked pale, I slipped a banana into his briefcase. He probably thought he put it there himself. Or maybe he thought Geneva did it. He never asked. When he fell asleep in the library with case files spread across his lap, I placed a glass of water on the table beside him. Just close enough that he would see it when he woke, but not so close he would knock it over. I adjusted the thermostat on nights when I heard him coughing. I made sure his favorite pens were always stocked in the library desk. I replaced the light bulb in his reading lamp before he noticed it was dimming. These were the only ways I could mother him. Invisible care, anonymous love, the kind that never asks for credit or acknowledgement. Sometimes I wondered if he felt it. If some part of him, buried deep in his subconscious, recognized that someone was watching over him the way mothers do. But mostly, I knew the truth. He did not feel it. He did not see me. And that was exactly how it had to be. There were moments when I saw the man my son had become, and my heart ached with pride I had no right to feel. One afternoon, a guest at a luncheon snapped her fingers at one of the younger staff members. The girl, barely 20, flinched like she had been slapped. Tavian saw it. He walked over, smiled at the guest with a politeness that barely masked his anger, and said, "Her name is Monica. If you need something, you can ask her using her name." The guest went pale. She apologized. Tavian stayed there until Monica felt safe enough to continue working. Later, when no one was watching, I saw him slip Monica an extra $20 bill and tell her she did not deserve to be treated that way. He stood up for people who could not stand up for themselves. That was the kind of man he was. But he also worked himself into the ground. There were weeks when I barely saw him eat. Weeks when he came home after midnight and left again before dawn. Weeks when the shadows under his eyes got so dark, I wanted to march into his office and demand he sleep. One Thursday, Josephine texted him 3 angry emojis and a heart because he forgot his own birthday dinner. He showed up an hour late, still in his suit, smelling like coffee and stress, apologizing to a table of family friends who had been waiting with cold food and warm wine. He sounded so happy without me, I almost convinced myself I had made the right choice. The birthday cake triggered something in me. I watched Josephine light the candles while Tavian laughed at something one of the guests said. And suddenly, I was not in the Kensington dining room anymore. I was in the hospital. 22 years ago. Day 5. The social worker came in the morning, carrying a manila folder and a smile that was practiced to look kind. "Have you thought about what we discussed?" she asked. I had thought about nothing else. My son was in the bassinet beside my bed, sleeping with his tiny fists curled near his face. He was perfect. 5 days old and already the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. But the medical bills were stacked on the table beside me. My mother's diabetes treatments, the emergency surgery she needed that insurance would not cover. The rent we could not pay. Deacon was gone, buried 3 weeks and 2 days. I had no degree, no job that paid more than minimum wage. No family besides a mother who could barely take care of herself. The social worker opened the folder. "The Kensingtons are a good family," she said. "They can give him stability, education, opportunities." She did not say what we both knew. That I could not. The pen sat on top of the folder. All I had to do was pick it up. "He deserves more than I can give him," I whispered. The social worker nodded. "You're doing the right thing." I reached for the pen. My hand hovered over the paper. The nurse walked by the door, saw me, and paused. She looked at me with eyes that had seen this moment 100 times before. But I did not sign. Not yet. Not on day 5. I blinked, and I was back in the dining room. Tavian was blowing out the candles. 27 of them, plus 1 for luck. Everyone clapped. Josephine beamed like he had just won a Nobel Prize instead of surviving another year. He laughed, and the sound filled the room like light. I stood in the doorway with an empty tray, watching the life I had given him unfold exactly the way I had hoped it would. Later that night, I heard him on the phone in the library. I was not trying to eavesdrop, but his voice carried through the heating vents into the hallway where I was putting away linens. "Mom really went all out this year," he said, laughing. "I swear she invited half of Atlanta just to embarrass me with baby photos." A pause. Then, quieter, warmer. "Yeah, I'm lucky. I know that. Some people spend their whole lives wondering if they were wanted. I never had to." The words hit me like a fist to the chest. He sounded so happy without me. So complete. So whole. And for just a moment, standing alone in that hallway with my arms full of folded towels, I almost convinced myself I had made the right choice. Almost. She arrived on a Tuesday evening in October, and I knew immediately she was different. Sterling Harlow stepped out of a silver Audi wearing a tailored pantsuit and heels that clicked against the stone driveway with the confidence of someone who had never doubted her place in the world. But when I opened the door, she smiled at me. Not the vague, polite smile rich people give to staff, a real smile, the kind that reached her eyes. "You must be Corinne," she said, extending her hand. "Tavian mentioned you keep this whole house running." I shook her hand, surprised. "He did?" He said, "If I wanted to impress his mother, I should ask you what her favorite flowers are." She leaned in like we were conspirators. "So, what are they?" "Gardenias," I said. "But she pretends to like roses because they are more elegant." Sterling laughed. A real laugh, bright and unguarded. "I like you already." I showed her to the dining room where Tavian was waiting. And I watched the way his face changed when she walked in. He lit up. That was the only way to describe it. They moved around each other like people who had been doing this for years. Easy banter, shared jokes, the comfortable rhythm of 2 people who genuinely liked each other. I served dinner and tried not to stare. Sterling was beautiful. Dark brown skin, natural curls pulled into a low bun, a face that was striking without needing makeup. But it was not her beauty that caught my attention. It was the way she spoke. She was smart, wickedly smart. She debated case law with Tavian over the salad course, quoted legal precedents I had never heard of, and made Josephine laugh with a story about her disaster of a first day in court. She was also kind to me in a way that felt genuine. When I refilled her water glass, she said thank you and used my name. When I brought out dessert, she complimented the plating and asked if I had made it myself. Most guests did not even look at me. Josephine watched Sterling the way a jeweler examines a diamond, approving but calculating. She knew exactly who Sterling's parents were. Old Atlanta money. The Harlow name carried weight in the same circles as the Kensington name. Your mother and I served on the Arts Council together, Josephine said. Brilliant woman. Sterling smiled. She speaks highly of you too, Mrs. Kensington. It was a dance. A polite negotiation between two dynasties feeling each other out. And Tavian, caught in the middle, looked happier than I had seen him in months. I should have been happy for him. And part of me looked at Sterling and thought, she is exactly the kind of woman I would have wanted for my son. Smart, successful, kind, someone who challenged him and made him laugh. But the other part of me, the selfish part I tried to bury, felt a grief so heavy I could barely breathe. Another woman was getting front row seats to his milestones. She would be the one he introduced to colleagues, the one he brought to family gatherings, the one who got to kiss him goodnight and wake up beside him and know every dream he whispered in the dark. She would be his future, and I would still be the woman who refilled water glasses and pretended not to exist. This was not romantic jealousy. It was something deeper, something more complicated. It was the jealousy of a mother watching someone else live the life she gave away. I cleared the dessert plates and retreated to the kitchen where I could finally breathe. Sterling found me loading the dishwasher 20 minutes later. I just wanted to thank you again, she said, leaning against the counter. Dinner was perfect. You're welcome, Miss Harlow. Sterling, please. She watched me work for a moment, then asked casually, do you have kids, Corinne? My hands froze on a plate. The question was innocent, just small talk. The kind of thing people ask when they are trying to be friendly. But it carved me open. No, ma'am. I lied. Sterling nodded. I keep going back and forth about it myself. My career is finally taking off, and the idea of pausing it terrifies me. But then I see Tavian with his nieces and nephews at firm events, and I think maybe someday. She had no idea what those words cost me. I forced a smile. I'm sure you and Mr. Tavian will figure it out when the time is right. She smiled back, completely unaware that I was bleeding right in front of her. I hope so, she said. After she left, I stood alone in the kitchen, gripping the edge of the sink so hard my knuckles went white. I had a son once. You were just sitting next to him. The words stayed locked in my throat where they belonged. I heard them through the window that night. It was late, past 11. I was closing up the kitchen when I saw them in the garden, walking the stone path beneath the oak trees. I should have gone to my room. I should have given them privacy. But I stood at the window and listened like the ghost I was. I really like your mom, Sterling said. Tavian laughed. She likes you too. Trust me, if she did not, you would know. What about you? Sterling's voice was quieter now. Do you like me? I more than like you. There was a pause, the kind of pause that meant they were kissing. Then Tavian spoke again, and his voice was softer than I had ever heard it. My parents saved me, he said. I never had to wonder if I was wanted. I never had to question whether I was loved. Some adopted kids spend their whole lives searching for answers, but I have everything I need right here. My heart cracked down the middle. If he knew the full story, would he still say that? Would he still believe he was saved? Or would he see me as the woman who abandoned him for money and convenience? I backed away from the window before I could hear any more. That night, I lay awake in the carriage house, staring at the ceiling and asking a question that had no answer. What if the truth destroyed everything I had sacrificed to give him? 6 months later, the estate transformed into something out of a magazine. White tents stretched across the back lawn. String lights hung from every tree. A DJ set up near the pool. Caterers I had never worked with before moved through the kitchen like an invading army. The engagement party was everything Josephine had promised it would be. Elegant, expensive, flawless. I managed the staff, coordinated with vendors, ensured every glass was filled and every plate was perfect. This was my job now. Not just servant, but the invisible architect of their happiness. 200 guests arrived in designer clothes and luxury cars. I recognized faces from television. Lawyers, politicians, old Atlanta families whose names were carved into buildings downtown. Tavian and Sterling stood at the center of it all, glowing. She wore a cream dress that probably cost more than I made in 6 months. He wore a navy suit that fit him like it had been painted on. They held hands and laughed and accepted congratulations from a line of guests that never seemed to end. I watched from the edges and told myself this was what I wanted. The worst part came after dinner. Someone dimmed the lights. A screen dropped down near the bandstand. And suddenly, Tavian's life was playing out in photographs projected 10 feet high. Baby photos, birthday parties, first day of school, little league, high school graduation, college, law school. Every milestone captured and displayed for 200 people to admire. Josephine and Franklin beaming in every frame. Tavian growing from a tiny boy to the man standing in front of me. There was not a single photograph from before the adoption. Nothing from his first 11 days of life. Nothing from the hospital where I held him. Nothing from the moment he was born. It was like I had been erased from history. I knew it would be this way. I had signed papers that guaranteed it. A closed adoption meant no records, no proof, no evidence that I had ever been his mother. But seeing it projected in front of 200 people made it real in a way it had never been before. I had no photographs, no baby clothes, no hospital bracelet, nothing. If I told someone tomorrow that Tavian was my son, I would have no way to prove it. The slideshow ended, and Tavian took the microphone. "I want to thank everyone for coming tonight," he said, his voice steady and warm. "Sterling and I are so grateful to celebrate this moment with the people we love." The crowd applauded. He turned to Josephine, who sat at the head table with tears in her eyes. "Mum, I would not be standing here without you. You and Dad chose me. You gave me a life I could never have imagined. You taught me what family means." His voice wavered, just slightly. "I have never needed to go searching for the past. I have never wondered where I came from or who I was supposed to be, because everything I need is right here." The applause was thunderous. I stood near the bar, holding an empty tray, and felt the world tilt beneath my feet. My hands shook so badly I almost dropped it. Geneva appeared beside me, steadied the tray, and whispered, "Breathe." I breathed, barely. Tavian kissed Sterling. The crowd cheered. The DJ started the music again, and I walked back to the kitchen before anyone could see me fall apart. That night, I sat alone in my room with a shoebox on my lap. Inside was everything I had left from the 11 days I was his mother. A hospital bracelet, baby Vickers, boy. September 14th, 3:47 a.m. A single photograph taken by a nurse who took pity on me. Corinne at 18, holding a newborn, looking directly at the camera like she was trying to memorize the moment. A blanket he had been wrapped in, blue with white stars. I stole it the day I signed the papers. A newspaper clipping from years later when Franklin Kensington's company won a major contract. The article mentioned his son Tavian, age 7, and included a photo of them at a ribbon-cutting ceremony. That was the first time I saw what my baby looked like after I gave him away. I had clipped every mention of the Kensington family I could find after that. Awards, charity events, school honors. I built a scrapbook of a life I was not part of. Now I sat in the carriage house, looking out the window at the main estate, where my son was celebrating his engagement to a woman who would give him the future I could not. I whispered the words I could never say out loud. "You don't even know who you're thanking." And I put the shoebox back under my bed, where it had lived for 23 years, hidden, just like me. The first crack appeared 8 months after the engagement party. I was in the hallway outside the library, folding linens from the dryer, when I heard voices rising behind the closed door. "You are never here," Tavian. Sterling's voice was sharp with frustration. I am building a career. I am doing this for us. No. You are doing this for you. I should have walked away, should have given them privacy. But my feet stayed planted on the carpet, and my hands kept folding the same towel over and over. That's not fair, Tavian said. Fair? Sterling laughed, but there was no humor in it. I have not had dinner with you in 3 weeks. You missed my mother's birthday. You fell asleep during the engagement photos. When exactly are you building this life for us? I am trying to make partner before I am 30. Do you know how rare that is? I know exactly how rare it is. I am a lawyer too, remember? The difference is I still make time for the people I love. Silence. Then Tavian. Quieter. I do love you. I know. Sterling's voice broke. But I do not think you love me more than you love your career. And I cannot compete with that. I heard footsteps. I grabbed my basket and disappeared into the nearest room before the library door opened. I found Sterling 20 minutes later in the guest's bathroom. She was sitting on the closed toilet lid, crying quietly into her hands. Her mascara had run, leaving dark streaks down her cheeks. I knocked softly. Miss Harlow? She looked up, startled. Then her face crumpled all over again. I am sorry, she said, wiping at her eyes. I am fine. I just need a minute. I stepped inside and closed the door behind me. Let me get you a towel. I handed her a clean washcloth and watched as she pressed it against her face. She looked younger like this, vulnerable, human. He is a good man, she said after a moment. I know he is. But some people are married to their dreams, and there is no room for anyone else. I did not know what to say, so I just stood there, a silent witness to her heartbreak. I thought I could be enough, she whispered. I thought if I loved him hard enough, he would choose me. The words landed in my chest like stones, because I knew exactly what that felt like. Sterling moved her things out on a Saturday morning. There was no dramatic scene, no shouting or thrown objects, just quiet boxes loaded into the trunk of her Audi, while Tavian watched from the front steps. They spoke in low voices I could not hear. She touched his face once, gently, like she was saying goodbye to someone she still loved. Then she drove away. Tavian stood on the steps for a long time after her car disappeared. When he finally came inside, his face was blank, carefully blank. He went straight to his office and did not come out. For the next 3 weeks, he barely ate. He barely slept. He worked 18-hour days and came home smelling like coffee and exhaustion. I left food outside his office door. Sometimes he ate it. Mostly he did not. Josephine tried to talk to him once. I heard her through the door. Better now than after a wedding, she said. That is not helpful, Mom. I am just saying, please. I do not want to talk about this. She left him alone after that. But I did not. I could not. Late one Thursday night, I was cleaning the kitchen when Tavian walked in. He looked like he had aged 10 years in 3 weeks. Shadows under his eyes, stubble on his jaw, his shirt wrinkled like he had been wearing it for 2 days. Could not sleep, I asked quietly. Have not been able to sleep in a while. He sat down at the kitchen island. I poured him a glass of water and set it in front of him without a word. Sterling was right, he said suddenly. I paused, unsure if I was supposed to respond. She said, I love my work more than I loved her. He stared at the glass. And she was right. Josephine walked in, tying her robe. She must have heard him moving around. Tavian. It is 2 in the morning. I do not know what love is supposed to feel like, he said, his voice cracking. Everyone talks about it like it is this obvious thing. But I do not know. I thought I loved Sterling. But if I did, would not I have chosen her? Josephine sat down beside him. Love is complicated, sweetheart. That is not an answer. I turned back to the sink, wiping down counters that were already clean, and listened to my son admit he did not know how to love. And I thought quietly, in the privacy of my own mind, I do. Love feels like this ache that never leaves. I finished the kitchen and left them alone. Back in my room, I sat on the edge of my bed and thought about everything I had just heard. Tavian did not know what love was supposed to feel like. But I did. Love was scrubbing floors. You did not need to scrub, just to stay near someone who would never know your name. Love was watching him laugh with a woman who was not you and being grateful he was happy, even though it tore you apart. Love was making breakfast he would never eat and leaving water by his bed when he fell asleep with case files on his chest. Love was choosing his happiness over your own, every single day, for 23 years. I knew what love felt like. It felt like drowning in shallow water, where everyone could see you struggling, but no one knew you needed help. It felt like this ache that never, ever left. 3 months after Sterling left, the world exploded. I was in the staff lounge, folding napkins for a dinner party, when the news broke on the television mounted in the corner. Breaking news tonight. Harlow Investments, one of Atlanta's oldest wealth management firms, has been exposed as a Ponzi scheme. Founder Richard Harlow was arrested this morning on charges of fraud, embezzlement, and money laundering. I stopped folding. The screen showed footage of Sterling's father being led out of his office in handcuffs. Silver hair, expensive suit. The kind of man who had spent his entire life convincing people to trust him. The news anchor continued. Investigators say the scheme may have been running for over a decade, defrauding investors of an estimated $300 million. $300 million. The number was so large it did not feel real. Within days, the ripple effect reached everyone. I overheard phone calls in Josephine's office, friends calling to say they had lost their retirement savings. Church members who had trusted Richard Harlow with their life savings, now left with nothing. One of Tavian's colleagues at the firm had parents who lost everything. Their home, their security, everything they had built over 40 years of marriage. The anger in Atlanta's wealthy circles was sharp and personal, and some of it landed on Tavian. At a fundraiser the following week, I was serving champagne when I heard a woman whisper to her husband he was engaged to that man's daughter. "You do not think he knew?" Another guest, louder, after too much wine, "I thought you lawyers were supposed to see these things coming." Tavian heard that one. I saw his jaw tighten. But he said nothing. He was guilty by association, stained by proximity to a scandal he had nothing to do with. But in circles like this, perception mattered more than truth. It all came to a head one night in the kitchen. I was preparing dinner when I heard Tavian and Josephine arguing in the dining room. Their voices carried through the open door. "They think I am part of it," Tavian said. His voice was tight with anger. "They think because I dated his daughter, I had to know. And did you?" Josephine's voice was ice. Silence. "Mom, are you seriously asking me that? I need to hear you say it. I knew nothing." The words came out sharp, definitive. Sterling did not even know. Her father hid it from everyone, including his own family. Another pause. Then Josephine, softer. "I believe you, do you? Because it does not sound like you do." "I believe you," she repeated, "but other people will not. You need to be prepared for that." I heard a chair scrape back. Footsteps. Tavian appeared in the kitchen doorway, saw me, and stopped. For a moment, we just looked at each other. "Sorry," he muttered. "Did not mean to bring the drama in here." "No apology needed, Mr. Tavian." He left without another word. But Josephine did not leave. I heard her on her phone in the dining room, her voice low and urgent. I should have walked away, should have gone to another part of the house, but something in her tone made me freeze. "No," Josephine said. "We cannot have another scandal attached to this family. Not after what we did in 2002 to get him." My blood went cold. What we did in 2002 to get him. 2002 was the year Tavian was adopted. What we did. The words echoed in my head. I stood in the kitchen, my hands shaking, trying to piece together what she meant. Did the Kensingtons do something more than just fill out adoption papers? Did they pay someone? Pressure someone? Manipulate the system? Did they know I was being coerced? Questions I had buried for 23 years suddenly clawed their way to the surface. I stayed in the kitchen long after Josephine hung up. At that moment, I realized Josephine had not just found my baby through normal channels. She might have moved heaven and hell to get him, and I did not know what that meant. If you were me, would you start digging into what really happened back then? Would you risk destroying the life your child has now just to know the truth? Or would you keep your head down, stay invisible, and protect the only thing that mattered, his happiness? Let me know in the comments, because what I chose next set everything else in motion. And if you are still with me, hit that like button so more people can see how messy love can get behind rich people's gates. Geneva taught me everything. In those first months, when I was still learning how to be invisible, she walked me through every detail. Mrs. Kensington likes her coffee at exactly 170 degrees, not hotter. Use the thermometer. Mr. Tavian does not like to be disturbed before 8 a.m. unless the house is on fire. And even then, assess the size of the fire first. Never arrange white roses with red. Mrs. Kensington says it looks like a funeral. She taught me how to read their moods, how to anticipate needs before they were spoken, how to move through the house like air, present but unnoticed. But more than that, she taught me how to survive. Late at night, after the family had gone to bed, Geneva and I would sit in the kitchen and drink tea. She never asked why I had taken this job. Never questioned why someone with my experience would want to live in a carriage house and serve a family I had no connection to. But I think she knew. One night she said, "I know what it is to love someone from a distance." She did not elaborate, and I did not ask, but I understood. Geneva started getting tired halfway through my 3rd year. Little things at first. She forgot where she put the menu for a dinner party. She had to sit down after climbing the stairs. She excused herself from a luncheon early, something she had never done before. Josephine noticed. "Geneva, are you feeling all right?" "Just a little under the weather, ma'am." But it was not just the weather. 2 weeks later, Geneva told me the truth in the kitchen, her voice steady but her hands shaking. "Pancreatic cancer. Stage 4. I dropped the plate I was holding. It shattered on the tile floor. "They are giving me 6 months," she continued. "Maybe less. Geneva, I need you to promise me something." She gripped my hand. "This house will eat you alive if you do not remember who you were before it. Do not let them make you disappear." I promised, even though I was not sure I could keep it. Geneva lasted 4 months. Toward the end, she was in and out of Emory University Hospital. Josephine paid for everything. Private room, the best doctors, round-the-clock care. I visited as often as I could. One afternoon, when it was just the two of us, Geneva looked at me with eyes that were too tired to pretend anymore. "You love him," she said. My heart stopped. "Who? Do not insult me, Corinne. I have known since the day you walked through those gates." I did not deny it. There was no point. "Does Josephine know?" I whispered. Geneva smiled faintly. "Josephine knows everything eventually. The question is what she will do about it." She reached for my hand. Secrets do not disappear just because rich people can afford bigger closets. Eventually, someone opens the door. She died 3 days later. Geneva's funeral was small but dignified. Josephine arranged everything. A service at a historic church in downtown Atlanta. A reception at the estate. Flowers everywhere. The Kensington family attended, of course. Tavian gave a short, respectful speech about Geneva's years of service. Josephine cried quietly in the front pew, but the staff attended too. Gardeners, housekeepers, drivers, people Geneva had worked alongside for decades. We sat in the back, away from the family, because that was the order of things. But when it was over, I realized something. Geneva was the only person who had truly seen all of them, the rich and the help, as human. To the Kensingtons, we were invisible until we were needed. To some of the staff, the Kensingtons were untouchable figures we resented from a distance. But Geneva moved between both worlds with grace. She demanded respect without cruelty. She gave loyalty without losing herself. And now she was gone. After the funeral, as guests were leaving, Josephine found me in the hallway. "Corinne, I need to speak with you." My stomach dropped. "Of course, Mrs. Kensington." "Not here. My study. Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. She walked away before I could respond. That night, I barely slept. Did she know? Had Geneva told her? Was I about to lose everything? At 9 a.m. the next morning, I stood outside Josephine's study with my hands trembling and my heart in my throat. I knocked. "Come in." I opened the door, and everything changed. Josephine sat behind her desk, hands folded, looking every bit the woman who had built an empire alongside her late husband. "Sit," she said. I sat. Geneva held this household together for 30 years. Finding someone to replace her is impossible. She paused. "But I think you are capable of stepping into her role." I blinked. "Mrs. Kensington, I am offering you the position of head of household. You will oversee all staff, manage schedules, coordinate with vendors, and handle the day-to-day operations of the estate." She slid a folder across the desk. Inside was a contract. A salary that was 3 times what I currently made. "You have proven yourself trustworthy, discreet, competent." Her eyes locked onto mine. "I need someone I can rely on." I stared at the contract. This was everything I had strategized toward. More access, more responsibility, more proximity to Tavian. But it also meant walking deeper into a life built on my own loss. "Thank you, Mrs. Kensington," I said. "I accept." She nodded. "Good. You start immediately." That night, I sat in my room with the signed contract on my lap. I should have felt victorious. I had worked for this, planned for this, sacrificed for this, but all I felt was hollow. I was now head of household in my son's home. I had more access to his life than ever before. I coordinated his schedule, managed his events, interacted with him directly on logistics. But I was still a ghost, still invisible in all the ways that mattered. I thought about what Geneva said. "Do not let them make you disappear." But I had already disappeared. 23 years ago, the moment I signed those adoption papers. Now I was just a shadow haunting the edges of a life I could never claim. 2 months into my new role, I started noticing things. Josephine tired more easily. She used to host events that lasted hours without sitting down. Now she excused herself halfway through and retreated to her study. Her hands trembled when she thought no one was looking. She hid it well, folding them in her lap or gripping the edge of a table. And there were new pill bottles in her bathroom. I saw them when I was supervising the cleaning staff. I did not ask. It was not my place, but I started adjusting things quietly, moving dinner to an earlier hour so she could rest, reducing her schedule, taking on more of the logistics so she did not have to. She never acknowledged it, but she did not stop me either. One night, I found her sitting alone in the kitchen at midnight. She was staring at a cup of tea that had gone cold, her face drawn and tired in the dim light. "Mrs. Kensington, can I get you anything?" She looked up, startled. Then she smiled faintly. "No, thank you, Corinne. I just could not sleep." I hesitated. Then I poured myself a cup of tea and sat down across from her. We sat in silence for a long moment. "I am not afraid of dying," she said suddenly. The words hung in the air between us. "Ma'am, I have had a good life, a long life. I have accomplished more than I ever dreamed." Her voice was quiet, reflective. "But I am afraid of leaving him alone." She meant Tavian. "He will not be alone," I said before I could stop myself. Josephine looked at me, really looked at me. "No," she said slowly, "I suppose he will not." A few days later, I was in the hallway when I saw Josephine watching me. I was near the library, adjusting a vase of flowers, and Tavian was inside on a phone call. I could hear his voice through the door, and without thinking, I paused to listen. Just for a moment, just to hear him. When I turned, Josephine was standing at the end of the hallway. Our eyes met. The look she gave me was not anger. It was not suspicion. It was recognition. She knew. Not the details, maybe. Not the whole story. But she knew I was not just a loyal employee. She knew I was watching her son the way mothers do. And she said nothing. She just turned and walked away, leaving me standing in the hallway, trembling, wondering how much longer I could keep this secret, and how much longer she would let me. 3 weeks later, Josephine summoned me to her study again. Close the door, she said. I obeyed. Her desk was covered in papers, and in the center, a manila folder with my name on it. My full name. Corinne Delane Vickers, not Ellis Vickers, my real name. The name I had buried when I came to this house. Sit down, Josephine said. I sat. She opened the folder and began to read. Corinne Delane Vickers, born March 3, 1984, in Macon, Georgia. Mother, Delane Vickers, deceased 2015. Father, unknown. She looked up. Shall I continue? My throat was too tight to speak. She kept reading. Navicent Health Medical Center, September 14, 2002, delivered a male infant, 7 pounds 4 ounces. Baby discharged into the care of... She paused. Franklin and Josephine Kensington. The room tilted. Did you think I would not investigate the woman who suddenly wanted to live in my house? Josephine's voice was calm. Too calm. I have known who you are since the day you walked through my gates. I could not breathe. Mrs. Kensington, Why? She interrupted. Why did you come here? The question cracked me open. I had to see if he was okay, I whispered. The words tumbled out, unstoppable now. I had to know if I made the right choice. I had to see his face, hear his voice, know that he was happy. Tears were streaming down my face. I did not come to take him from you. I did not come to ruin his life. I came because I was going crazy, Mrs. Kensington. 22 years of wondering if he was safe, if he was loved, if he even existed anymore. I just needed to see him. Josephine said nothing. I never meant to stay this long, I continued. I thought I would see him once and leave, but then I saw how you loved him, and I could not walk away. Because you gave him everything, I could not. My voice broke. I am sorry. I am so sorry. Josephine stood and walked to the window. Tell me about the day you signed the papers, she said quietly. I closed my eyes. I was 18 years old, sitting in a small office that smelled like old carpet and lemon cleaner. A social worker sat across from me with documents spread across the table. Behind her, through a small window in the door, I could see Franklin Kensington in the hallway, talking to an attorney. He never looked at me. Not once. This is the only way he gets everything you cannot give him, the social worker said. Her voice was kind but firm. The Kensingtons can provide stability, education, opportunities. On the table in front of me was a check. Enough to cover my mother's hospital bills. Enough to keep her alive for another year. You are doing the right thing, the social worker said. A nurse stood in the doorway, watching. She had been the one to take the single photograph I still owned. She gave me a sad smile. I picked up the pen. My hand shook so hard I could barely write my name. When it was done, the social worker took the papers and left. The nurse whispered, "You are doing the right thing," and followed her out. And I sat alone in that room, staring at the check, thinking, then why does it feel like dying? I opened my eyes. Josephine was still at the window, her back to me. We were desperate, she said. Her voice was softer now. Franklin and I tried for 10 years to have a child. Every treatment failed. Every pregnancy ended before it began. She turned to face me. When we found out about a healthy newborn available for adoption, we did everything we could to make it happen. Everything. Her eyes met mine. I told myself you were just a name on a file, a girl who made a choice and moved on. I never let myself think about who you were, what you lost. She sat down across from me. Then you walked into my kitchen, and I knew. Why did you let me stay? I whispered. Josephine was quiet for a long time. Because I saw the way you looked at him, she said finally, and I realized you loved him the way I did. Josephine opened another folder. Inside were medical documents, test results, diagnoses I did not understand but recognized from Geneva's final months. I am dying, she said simply. Pancreatic cancer, stage 4. I have 2 years at most. I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. When I am gone, he will need someone who loves him the way you do. She looked at me, but he also deserves to know the truth. Mrs. Kensington, I am writing a letter, to be opened after my death. It will explain everything. Who you are, why you came here, why I let you stay. My heart was pounding. I want you to be there when he reads it, she said. I want you to answer his questions, to tell him your side of the story. He will hate me, I whispered. Maybe. Josephine's voice was steady. But he deserves the truth. And so do you. She leaned forward. Are you willing to let him hate you if that is the price of giving him the truth? I could not answer. How do you choose between your child's love and his right to know where he came from? How do you decide which is more important, his happiness or his truth? Josephine waited, and I sat there, silent and shaking, unable to give her an answer, because I did not know which choice would destroy him more, the truth he never asked for, or the lie I had been living for 5 years. Imagine the only child you ever had looking at you with the same eyes you gave him, and those eyes filled with hate. Could you still tell him the truth? Or would you keep your secret and your place in his life? I want to know which choice you would make. Comment below and let me know. And stay with me, because what happened next changed everything. 6 months later, Josephine collapsed at a charity gala. She had been planning the event for a year, a fundraiser for children's hospitals held in the ballroom of the Buckhead Grand Hotel. 500 guests, a live orchestra, a silent auction with items worth 6 figures. Josephine stood at the podium, delivering the opening remarks, when her words started to slur. I was coordinating with the caterers in the back of the room. I looked up just in time to see her grip the podium, her knuckles going white. Mrs. Kensington. Someone called from the audience. She tried to smile, tried to continue, then her legs gave out, and she crumpled. The room exploded into chaos. Tavian was at her side in seconds, shouting for someone to call an ambulance. Guests backed away, whispering, pulling out phones to record the moment. I pushed through the crowd and knelt beside her. Her eyes found mine, just for a second, and in that look, I saw everything. Fear, resignation, a silent plea. Take care of him. I rode in the ambulance. Tavian was too focused on his mother to question why the head of household was there. He held Josephine's hand and spoke to her in a low, urgent voice, begging her to stay awake. I sat in the corner, silent and invisible, the way I had always been. At the hospital, they rushed her into the ICU. Tavian paced the waiting room, making phone calls, coordinating with doctors, refusing to sit down. Hours passed. Finally, they let him see her. I stayed in the waiting room, watching through the window as my son sat beside the woman who raised him, holding her hand like she was the only thing anchoring him to the earth. He fell asleep in the chair beside her bed, and I walked in, quiet as a ghost, and laid a blanket over his shoulders. I adjusted his head so he would not wake up with a stiff neck. I touched his hair, just once, the way mothers do. Then I left before he could wake up and see me. Josephine woke at 3 in the morning. She called for me. The nurse found me in the hallway and said Mrs. Kensington was asking for Corinne. When I entered, Tavian was still asleep. Josephine gestured for me to come closer. Her voice was weak, but her words were clear. The letter is in my desk, locked drawer. The key is hidden under my pearl necklace in the jewelry box. I nodded. He must read it after I am gone, not before. Do you understand? Yes, ma'am. She reached for my hand. He needs to hear it from me first. Then from you. Her grip tightened. He needs to know you loved him enough to disappear. Tears blurred my vision. Thank you, I whispered. For loving him. Josephine smiled faintly. Thank you for giving him to me. Josephine died the next morning. I was the one who found her. I had come to check on Tavian, to bring him coffee, and when I walked into the room, I knew. She was still, too still. I took her hand. It was already cold. Thank you, I whispered again. For everything. The funeral was 3 days later. It was lavish, dignified, exactly what Josephine would have wanted. Hundreds of people filled the church. Politicians, business leaders, philanthropists. Tavian stood at the front, his face a careful mask, delivering a eulogy that made people cry. I stood at the back, invisible among the staff, mourning a woman who had been both my enemy and my ally, the woman who took my son, and the woman who let me love him from a distance. That night, I went to Josephine's study. My hands trembled as I unlocked the desk drawer. Inside was an envelope with Tavian's name written in Josephine's elegant script. I lifted it carefully. The first line was visible through the thin paper. "My son, by the time you read this, I will be gone, and you will finally know the name Corinne Delane Vickers." My breath caught. I could read the rest. I could know exactly what she told him, prepare myself for his reaction. But that felt like another betrayal. I sealed the envelope and placed it back in the drawer. "I have taken enough from you," I whispered. "The rest is yours to find." I locked the drawer and walked away. 3 days later, Tavian would find that letter, and everything I had spent 5 years building would come crashing down. The days after Josephine's funeral felt like living inside a held breath. The estate was too quiet. No morning instructions from Josephine. No scheduling meetings. No sounds of her heels clicking through the hallways at dawn, checking that everything was in order. The staff whispered in corners. Some were worried about their jobs. Others mourned genuinely. Most just went through the motions, waiting to see what would happen next. Tavian buried himself in his home office. I heard him in there at all hours, early morning conference calls, late-night document reviews, the sound of his printer running constantly as he worked through Josephine's estate, her business interests, her charitable foundations. He was using work the same way I used cleaning. As armor against grief, I kept my distance. Every time I passed his office door, I wanted to knock, to offer tea, to sit with him in silence the way Geneva used to sit with me. But I could not, because in a few days, maybe a week, he would find the letter, and everything would explode. So I waited, managed the household, coordinated with the remaining staff, kept the machine running while its owner figured out how to breathe without his mother. And I prepared myself for the moment when he would finally know my name. The call came on a Thursday morning. Josephine's attorney requested a meeting at the estate. He arrived at 10 a.m. sharp, carrying a leather briefcase and the practiced sympathy of someone who delivered bad news professionally. I showed him to Tavian's office and closed the door behind him. I did not mean to eavesdrop, but I was in the hallway, and the walls in old houses carry sound. "Your mother left very detailed instructions," the attorney said. "Her will is straightforward. The estate, the business interests, the charitable trusts, all transfer to you with conditions outlined here." Papers rustled. There are also several personal items. Letters, actually. She wrote them over the past 6 months. A pause. "This one is marked, to be opened immediately after my death." More rustling. The sound of an envelope being opened. Then silence. Long, terrible silence. I heard Tavian stand abruptly. His chair scraped against the floor. "Is this some kind of joke?" His voice was tight, controlled in the way that meant he was barely holding together. "I assure you, Mr. Kensington, your mother was very clear about—" "Get out, sir. I need you to leave, now. I will call you when I am ready to discuss this further." Footsteps. The door opened. The attorney walked past me without making eye contact, his face professionally neutral. I heard something crash inside the office. Glass shattering. Then footsteps pacing. Back and forth. Back and forth. I stood frozen in the hallway, knowing the bomb had finally detonated. 3 hours later, Tavian found me in the laundry room. I was folding linens, focusing on perfect corners, trying not to think about what was coming. "Corinne." His voice made me jump. I turned. He stood in the doorway, and I barely recognized him. His tie was gone. His shirt was wrinkled. His eyes were red and swollen like he had been crying or fighting off crying for hours. In his hand, he held a piece of paper. Creased. "Read and reread." "We need to talk," he said. "Now." "Of course, Mr. Tavian. In the library." He turned and walked away without waiting for my response. I set down the linens with trembling hands and followed him through the house, down the hallway, past the dining room where we had served his engagement party, past the kitchen where he once told Josephine he did not know what love felt like, into the library. He was sitting in Josephine's old leather chair when I entered. The same chair she used to sit in when she managed household business. The same chair where she read late into the night, classical music playing softly in the background. Now Tavian sat there, looking lost. "Close the door," he said. I did. He held up the letter. His hand was shaking. "My mother wrote this 6 months ago. She had her attorney hold it until after the funeral." His voice cracked. "Do you know what it says?" I could barely breathe. "No, sir." "Liar." The word was not angry, just tired. "She says you know everything." He started reading aloud. "My dearest Tavian, by the time you read this I will be gone, and you will finally know the name Corinne Delane Vickers. She was 18 years old when she gave birth to you. She was alone, terrified, and drowning in circumstances no teenager should face." His voice wavered, but he kept reading. "Your father and I were desperate for a child. We had tried everything. When we learned about a healthy baby boy available for adoption, we did what we had to do to make sure he became ours." He looked up at me. "What does that mean? What did they do?" I could not answer. He kept reading. "Corinne is the girl who loved you enough to make the hardest choice I have ever witnessed. She signed papers that destroyed her so you could have the life I wanted to give you." Tears were streaming down his face now. "She applied to work in this house 5 years ago. I recognized her name the moment I saw the background check. I could have turned her away, but I saw the way she looked at you from across the solarium during that first brunch. I saw a mother who had spent 22 years wondering if her son was safe." His hands tightened on the paper. "I let her stay because I understood her, because I knew what it meant to love a child you could not have. The difference was, I got to keep mine. She had to watch hers from the shadows." Tavian set the letter down and looked at me. Really looked at me. For the first time in 5 years, he saw me as more than the woman who managed his household. "She says my birth mother is alive." His voice was barely a whisper. "She says my birth mother has been living in this house the whole time, sleeping under my roof, serving me dinner." He paused. The silence stretched between us like a chasm. "She says it's you, Corinne. Is that true?" My vision tunneled. The room tilted. My heart slammed against my ribs so hard I thought it might break through. This was the moment I had rehearsed 1,000 times, and none of those rehearsals had prepared me for the look in his eyes. "Yes," I whispered. The word hung in the air between us. Yes. After 23 years of silence, 5 years of secrets, a lifetime of grief. "Yes, I am your mother." He stood up so fast the chair nearly tipped over. "You have been in my house for 5 years?" His voice rose. 5 years, and you never said anything?" "Tavian, do not call me that. You do not get to—" He stopped, ran his hands through his hair. "What do I even call you? Mrs. Ellis? Corinne? Mom?" The last word came out like poison. "You watched me call someone else Mom. You ironed my shirts. You served my drinks. You stood in corners at parties I threw, and you, what? Got some kind of satisfaction from watching me live a life you gave away? It was not like that. Then what was it like?" He was shouting now. "Explain it to me, because from where I am standing, it looks like you played some kind of sick undercover game with my entire life." The accusation hit me like a slap. "I was your mother long before I was your maid," I said, and my voice was steadier than I expected. He stared at me. "I carried you for 9 months. I felt you kick at 2 a.m. and wondered if you would have my eyes or your father's smile. I held you for 11 days and memorized every sound you made. I was your mother when you did not have a name yet, when you were just mine." My voice broke. "So yes, I ironed your shirts. I served your drinks. I watched you from corners, because those were the only ways I could still be your mother after I signed the papers that made me a stranger." Tavian sank back into the chair. He looked exhausted, hollowed out, like someone had reached inside him and removed something essential. "I do not understand any of this," he said quietly. "I know. I do not understand why you gave me up, why you came back. Why you stayed. Why you let me live 5 years not knowing who you were. He looked at me with Deacon's eyes, and I felt the weight of every secret I had ever kept. Start from the beginning, he said. And this time, I want the truth. All of it. No more half-stories. No more secrets. I took a breath, and for the first time in 23 years, I told my son the whole story. I sat down across from him. Not because he invited me, but because my legs would not hold me anymore. I grew up in Macon, I began. South Macon, near the old mill. My mother worked 2 jobs and still could not pay rent most months. We moved 6 times before I was 10. Tavian said nothing. Just listened. I met your father when I was 16, Deacon Ashford. He played basketball at Southwest High. Everyone said he was going to get a scholarship, go to college, maybe even play professionally. I smiled at the memory. He had the kindest laugh. He could make me forget how tired I was, how scared I was about the future. He worked nights at a tire factory and days at his uncle's church, fixing roofs and painting walls. He was saving for college. My voice wavered. We were careful. But not careful enough. I found out I was pregnant 3 weeks after my 18th birthday. Tavian's jaw tightened, but he did not interrupt. We were terrified, but Deacon said we would figure it out together. He said love was enough. I looked down at my hands. He died 3 weeks before you were born. Car accident on I-75. A semi-truck jackknifed in the rain. His car did not stand a chance. The room was silent except for the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. I was 18, pregnant, and alone. My mother was dying from diabetes complications. The medical bills were drowning us. I had no degree, no job, no way to support a baby. I met his eyes. The social worker came to the hospital on your 5th day of life. She told me about a family who could give you everything I could not. Stability, education, a future. Did you fight for me? The question cut through the air like a blade. Did you ever try to get me back, contest the adoption? Look for me. The adoption was closed, I said. Legally, I had no right. I am not asking about legal rights. I am asking if you fought. I swallowed hard. No, I did not fight. His face crumbled. I believed I was doing what was best for you, I continued. I believed you deserved more than a 1-bedroom apartment and a mother who worked 3 jobs and still could not afford daycare. So you gave up. I made a choice. There is a difference. Is there? His voice was cold. Because, from where I am sitting, it looks the same. The words landed like physical blows. Why become my maid? He asked. Why not just knock on my door? Why not introduce yourself like a normal person instead of sneaking into my life pretending to be someone else? Because I was terrified, I said. The admission felt like ripping open an old wound. I was terrified you would slam the door in my face. Terrified you would hate me. Terrified that meeting me would ruin the perfect life I gave you. So you thought lying to me for 5 years was better. I thought watching over you from the shadows was better than barging in and blowing up everything you are. Tavian stood and walked to the window. Did you ever think, he said slowly, that maybe I would have wanted to know you before I turned 32? That maybe I spent my whole life wondering where I came from, and you could have answered that question any time in the last 5 years? You said at your engagement party that you never needed to search for the past. You said everything you needed was right here. He spun around, because I did not know there was anything to search for. My adoption records were sealed. My parents told me they loved me and that was enough. I did not know you existed, and if you had known, if I had knocked on your door 5 years ago and said, I am the woman who gave you away, what would you have done? He did not answer. You would have called security, I said quietly. Or worse, you would have let me in out of pity and spent the rest of your life resenting the stranger who disrupted your perfect family. You do not know that. I know that closed adoptions exist for a reason. I signed papers that said I would never contact you. Coming here, working here, was already breaking that agreement. But at least this way, I got to see you, make sure you were safe, love you from a distance. Tavian shook his head. That is not love. That is obsession. The word stung. Maybe it is both, I admitted. Do not blame my mother for this, Tavian said suddenly. I am not. She raised me. She was there for every scraped knee, every exam, every success. She loved me. I know she did. Then why does this letter sound like she felt guilty? Like she did something wrong? I stood and walked toward him, but stopped a few feet away, maintaining the distance he clearly needed. She was your mother in all the ways I could not be, I said. That does not mean I stopped being one. It just means I did it with the lights off. Tavian's eyes filled with tears. I do not know how to process this. I do not know how to have two mothers. One who raised me and one who gave you away so you could be raised, I finished. You do not have to choose between us, Tavian. Josephine is gone, and I am still here, but I am not here to replace her. I am here because I never stopped being your mother, even when I had no right to the title. He looked at me for a long moment. She loved you, I said, more than anything in this world. And I will spend the rest of my life being grateful to her for that. Tavian walked back to the desk and picked up the letter again. There is something else, he said. Something she wrote that I do not understand. He read aloud again. When we learned about you, we did what we had to do to make sure you became ours. I am not proud of every choice we made, but I have never regretted the outcome. He looked at me. What does that mean? What did they do? I hesitated. I do not know the full story, but you know something. I took a breath. There were things that never made sense. I was supposed to get a scholarship, a small one, from a church fund for single mothers trying to finish school. It would have covered childcare and community college tuition, and it disappeared. The day before I was supposed to sign the papers, the coordinator called and said the funding fell through. No explanation. Tavian's expression darkened. The adoption agency that handled your case did not usually work in our neighborhood. They specialized in private adoptions for wealthy families. I do not know how they found me. What else? Franklin was at the hospital the day I signed the papers. I saw him in the hallway, talking to the attorney. He never spoke to me, never looked at me, but he was there. Tavian's hands clenched into fists. Are you saying they sabotaged your scholarship so you would have no choice but to give me up? I am saying I was 18, scared, broke, and they put a pen in my hand. I do not know what happened behind closed doors. I only know the doors closed very quickly. Tavian slammed his hand on the desk. So I am a Kensington because you were desperate, because my life got traded for a check. You are a Kensington because I chose your future over my heart. That is not a choice. That is coercion. Maybe, I admitted. But it is the choice I made. And even knowing what I know now, even standing here with you looking at me like I am a stranger you hate, I would do it again. How can you say that? Because you are alive, you are educated, you are safe. You have had opportunities I could never have given you. You have become a man who stands up for people who cannot stand up for themselves. You have become everything I prayed you would be. My voice broke. So yes, it breaks me. It has broken me every single day for 23 years. But I would trade my heart for your future 1,000 times over, because that is what mothers do. Tavian stared at me, and I saw something shift in his expression. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But maybe the first crack in the wall between us. Then the crack closed. I need you to leave, he said. The words hit me like a punch to the chest. You want me to leave the room or leave the house? He turned away from me, facing the window. I do not know. I cannot look at you right now. I stood there, frozen, waiting for him to clarify, to tell me if this was temporary or permanent, if I had just lost him all over again. But he said nothing. So I walked to the door. My hand was on the handle when I stopped. For what it is worth, I said quietly, I am sorry. I am sorry I gave you up. I am sorry I came back. I am sorry I lied. I am sorry for all of it. I opened the door. But I am not sorry I loved you. I will never be sorry for that. I walked out and closed the door behind me. And I stood in the hallway shaking, wondering if I had just said goodbye to my son for the second time in his life. 5 days passed. Tavian communicated with me only through other staff members. He needed files from Josephine's office. He wanted dinner at 7 instead of 8. He would be working late. Do not wait up. Every message came through someone else, never directly. I debated leaving every single day, packing my things, writing a resignation letter, disappearing the way I had always known how to do. But every time I started, I remembered Josephine's words. When I am gone, he is going to need someone who loves him without condition. So I stayed. I managed the household. I kept the staff running smoothly. I left meals outside his office door and watched from my window as his light burned late into the night. I loved him from a distance, the way I always had. On the 6th day, Tavian left early in the morning. He did not tell anyone where he was going. Just got in his car and drove. He came back after sunset, and I could see from the carriage house window that something had changed. Later, I found out he had driven to Macon. He went to the hospital where he was born. He walked through the neighborhood where I grew up. He saw the tired houses with peeling paint and chain-link fences. He saw the corner store where I used to buy bread with food stamps. He found the church where Deacon had played basketball. On a dusty wall in the community center, there was still a photo of the 2001 Southwest High basketball team. Deacon was in the front row, holding a trophy, smiling like the world was his. Tavian stood there for 20 minutes, staring at his father's face, seeing the man who had given him his eyes, his height, his smile, the man who had wanted him but never got to meet him. When he came home that night, he looked different, quieter, like he had traveled to a country he had only heard about in stories and realized it was real. That night, I was cleaning the kitchen when he walked in. It was past 11. The house was quiet. He did not say anything at first, just stood in the doorway, watching me wipe down counters that were already clean. Then he pulled out a chair and sat at the table. Not the dining room table where family and guests ate. The kitchen table, the one where staff took their breaks. He gestured to the chair across from him. "Sit, please." It was the first time he had ever asked me to sit with him. I set down my towel and sat. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then Tavian said, "I went to Macon today." "I know." "How did you?" "I saw the GPS history on the household system. I managed the cars." He almost smiled. "Almost. I saw where you grew up. I saw the hospital. I saw the church." I nodded. There was a photo of my father on the wall. He looked happy. "He was," I said. "Deacon was the kind of person who made everyone around him happy. He had this laugh that filled a room. He could find light in anything." Tavian looked at me. What else? What else should I know about him? So I told him. I told him about Deacon's dream of becoming a coach, about the way he used to sneak me into movies through the back door because we could not afford tickets, about the night he proposed with a plastic ring from a vending machine and promised to replace it with a real one someday. I told him about the last time I saw Deacon alive, how he kissed my stomach and whispered to the baby he would never meet, how he said, "We are going to be okay, I promise." Tavian listened to every word. "He wanted you," I said, "more than anything. He was terrified and broke and 20 years old, but he wanted you, and you. I wanted you too. So much it scared me. But wanting you was not enough to keep you safe." Tavian was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "I am not ready to call you Mom." The words stung, but I understood. "You never have to," I said. "I did not come here for a title. I came here to make sure you got everything I could not give you back then. I do not know how to have two mothers, one who chose me and one who chose to give me up." I reached across the table but stopped short of touching his hand. "Maybe you do not have to choose. Maybe I live in the space between what she gave you and what I lost. Maybe that is enough." Tavian looked at the counter where I had left his dinner under a warming cover. "Have you eaten?" he asked. "Not yet." He stood, retrieved the plate, and brought it back to the table. Then he got another plate from the cabinet and divided the food between them. "Will you eat with me?" It was such a small gesture, sharing a meal, something families did every day without thinking. But for us, it was monumental. I took the plate he offered. We ate in silence. roasted chicken, vegetables, the same food I had been making for him for 5 years. But this time, I was not serving it. I was sharing it. When we finished, Tavian pushed his plate aside and looked at me. "I do not forgive you yet," he said. "I do not know if I ever will, but I think I understand why you did what you did. That is more than I deserve, maybe. But it is where we start." He stood to leave, then paused. "Corinne?" "Yes?" "Thank you. For dinner. And for—" he struggled to find the words, "for not giving up on me. Even when I gave up on you." He left before I could respond. I sat alone in the kitchen, tears streaming down my face, and thought, this is what hope feels like. People think the biggest secrets in rich houses are about money, offshore accounts, hidden trusts, business deals made in shadowy boardrooms. But the deepest secrets are the emotional debts, the sacrifices made so a child could grow up in a house like this instead of the one I came from. I paid a price for Tavian's future. I traded my right to be his mother for his right to become a Kensington. And I do not know if that was the right choice. Some days he talks to me like family. Other days, like staff. Most days, like something in between. But every day, he is alive. He is safe. He is educated. He has opportunities I could never have given him. He has become more than what my zip code would have allowed. So, maybe I did make the right choice. Or maybe there was no right choice, only the one I could live with. I still do not know how this story ends. Maybe it never really does. Maybe some stories do not get neat conclusions. They just keep unfolding, one complicated day at a time. But I know this: love is not always about being seen. Sometimes it is about watching from the shadows and being grateful they have light. Do you think I made the right choice? Giving him up so he could become a Kensington, then spending 5 years as his maid just to be near him? Tell me in the comments. I want to know what you would have done. And if you believe more people need to hear the real stories hiding behind mansion gates, share this video and hit subscribe. There are more secrets in beneath our last name than you would ever imagine. More stories about the prices people pay for the lives we see from the outside. Thank you for walking this journey with me. Thank you for listening without judgment. Thank you for understanding that sometimes love looks like sacrifice, and sacrifice looks like 5 years of invisible motherhood. 3 weeks later, Tavian was alone in Josephine's study. He'd been sorting through her things slowly. Her books, her correspondence, her personal effects. That was when he found the second envelope. It was hidden at the bottom of her desk drawer, underneath old tax documents and forgotten photographs. The envelope was sealed, and on the front, in Josephine's handwriting, "For when you are ready to learn what your father never knew." Tavian held it up to the light, debating whether to open it. Then he set it aside. Some truths could wait. But as he walked out of the study, he could not help but wonder, what secrets had Franklin taken to his grave? And what had Josephine known that even Corinne did not? Downstairs, in the kitchen, I was preparing dinner, and I heard him whisper to himself in the hallway, "What else did they do to get me?" The question hung in the air. Some truths, even billionaires cannot bury forever. Eventually, every secret comes to light, and when it did, I had a feeling the Kensington name would never be the same.